الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Inshallah, continue with the book of Akhsar Al-Mokhtasarat, and we had took from the book the transaction part, Al-Bay' and Sa'ir Al-Mu'amalat, and we have Al-Waqf wal-Hiba left, and that will be the end of the book of Mu'amalat. And before the end of this 1 year, inshallah, which is, we should, inshallah, finish by the end of August, inshallah, I wanted also to add to it al-wasaya and the mawarith, or al-fara'id, the inheritance, briefly, inshallah ta'ala. So this is what should be done, inshallah. And since Eid, we did not have any exams, so inshallah, next week we'll have a test, inshallah. Next weekend, inshallah, we'll have a test. And to prepare oneself for the final exam, inshallah, at the end of the month of August, inshallah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept, inshallah. So in the chapter of, he says, Faslun wal-Waqfu Sunnah. We took the Waqf before in the previous book, but here we just go follow the matn of Akhsar Al-Mokhtasarat, inshallah. And al-Waqf from waqafa, when something stops, or even when someone stands, it's called waqafa fulan. But what the definition of al-Waqf religiously, which they oftentimes they translate it as the endowment, or it's a form of endowment. So it's charity, and since the chapter of transaction is dealing with financial liabilities and the like of this, so the waqf here basically it's to as they call it tahbis al-asl wa tasbil al-manfa'a. You have asl, you have an asset that you would make habs of it. That means you do not sell it, you keep it, and tasbil al-manfa'a, and you make the benefit of it fi sabilillah. So a land, as is going to be explained, or a building or something, this is the asl, this is the asset. And this asset is not going to be sold, it's going to be waqf. That means it's going to be an endowment forever. And then whatever benefit comes from it, rent, land to be cultivated, all of that, the money that comes from it is to be given fi sabilillah in the charity, with the conditions and the way that it's mentioned in the waqf or the contract of al-waqf. So he says here, al-waqfu sunnah. Al-waqfu sunnah. And sunnah, that means it's recommended, and it's something that is recommended. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pleased with someone when he would make waqf, because it's a form of charity. So this is a form of charity, so that's why it's a sunnah. That means it's something that a person is encouraged to do. He says وَيَصِحُّ, that means the waqf becomes sahih, or becomes valid. بقول, here are the ways or how the endowment, or will keep it as waqf, right? So the waqf is basically, you have a charity that you keep the asset of it, and the benefit that you would give it for whatever specific things that a person intended for. So he says it's yasih, that means it's valid in these specific matters, which, as he says here, بقول, with a speech. So يصح بقول, that means a person would say that this land or this specific matter or this item is waqf. So he would say it with his speech. So this is how it becomes valid. وفعل دال عليه عرفا, and also it's valid to be waqf with an action. An action, dal, which is like a dalil, وفعل دال عليه, وفعل, there is an evident for by one's action that he's doing this action to make whatever he is doing as waqf. عرفا basically is what is well known among the people, or the norm of the people, that this is waqf. So this has become something that is known to the people. So the custom of the people. So if it's an act that customarily indicates it, that this is waqf, something, an action that the people of his locality or the people would consider whoever does this, he's giving whatever that place as waqf. As he says, كَمَنْ بَنَى أَرْضَهُ مَسْجِدًا أو مقبرة. If a person builds his land on his land a masjid, if it's a normal building, people would not know that this is a masjid. But if he builds it, looks like a masjid, has a minara, for example, has a, how masajid would look unique, right? A masjid doesn't have to look like a masjid, but if he makes something that looks, he did not say anything, but just he built something that looks like a masjid and the doors are open for the salawat and things like this. So that means this land becomes a masjid. So he made it as a waqf for a masjid. أو مقبرة, or he gave a land as a maqbara or cemetery, even if he didn't say anything. وأذن للناس أن يصلوا فيه ويدفنوا فيها. And he gave permission to the people أن يصلوا, that they would pray in it and bury there. So as you see here, وأذن للناس أن يصلوا. يصلوا is make salah, present tense. واو الجماعة. There's no noon at the end, not yusalluna, because an is present. When there's an before the verb, that means there's no noon there. And yusallu fihi. Fihi refers to what? What's the ha of the dhamir refers to? The masjid. This piece of land that he built the masjid on. وَيَدْفِنُوا فِيهَا. يَدْفِنُوا, present tense of a dafn. Dafana, that means bury someone. So يَدْفِنُوا, plural. يَدْفِنُوا فِيهَا. فِيهَا means in the maqbar, in the cemetery. The maqbara, as you see, is muannath. So وفعل دال, as you see here, the tanween وفعل دال عليه عرفا, the customary, or كمن, as if someone بنى, built in the past tense, أرضه, he built his land, مسجدا أو مقبرة. وأذن للناس, أذن past tense, he made permission للناس أن يصلوا فيه ويدفنوا فيها, right? That they pray in this masjid and they bury in it. He says وصريحه. صريح, الصريح is when something is straightforward, when something is explicit. So a clear term that a person would say with clear terms. What are the clear terms of waqf? Usually, of course, these things, you would have papers for it. A person would go forward, give papers. Government is, would be recognized, things like this. But again, as far as the contracts in the deen of Allah, it doesn't have to be written for it to be established as a contract. So, صريح, if a person says it or says these words, so whatever he said is binding, even if it's not written, even if it's not registered. Between him and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the matter is finished. As mentioned before with Al-Waqf, a person cannot take back his waqf. If he gave something as waqf, it's waqf for forever. He cannot cancel it out or say, I changed my mind. It's too late. Right? So this is, and then it's the waqf is kind of some of the ulama, they mentioned, it's when a person wants to have charity and a continuous charity in his lifetime, different than when someone makes wasiyah. The wasiyah is the next chapter, or after the hiba. When a person wants something to be of a charity after he dies, that's different. But al-waqf in his lifetime. So he says, وَصَرِيحُهُ, the clear terms of al-waqf is وَقَفْتُ. If he says وَقَفْتُ هذه الأرض لتكون مسجدا, I make this land waqf. I make this waqf of the land to be for a masjid. أو حبست. حبست, the same, al-habs is when you withhold something, the same thing or the same word is used for prison. So حبست, I made the habs, this place to be, I like designate a place, right? وسبلت. سبلت from as-sabil, but it basically means he make it, what's the word for it? Perpetual, if it's correct to say. That means he makes it going forever. سبلت نفعها. I made it, whatever comes from it is to go to, and then he would specify, or he doesn't specify, then this comes up next, inshallah. So وصريحه. So there is alfaz صريحة. There are clear terms in certain situations, in contracts, in marriage, in talaq. So these clear words can be in whatever language. If a person says it and it's very clear, no one would misunderstand it, then the ruling applies. وكنايته, الكناية is the opposite of الصريح. الكناية is when something is not clear. So it's something that is implicit or can mean more than one thing. So therefore, الكناية here, when a person says تصدقت, I gave charity. When he says تصدقت, it can be charity, like he gave it to someone as charity, or it can be waqf. That means it's according to his intentions. وحرمت, I forbade. He says, I forbade this land, meaning for anyone to take it. It's because it's the waqf is no one has the right to own this land anymore. If he gives it as waqf, no one is allowed to sell it. No one is allowed to give it as a gift, and so on. وأبدت, أبدت, the same thing. I make it forever. From al-abad, I make it forever. That means it's for no one whatsoever. Okay, so this is al-kinayat. So al-kinayat, it's not only these words, anything that can give more than one meaning. Then when the lafz, when the word is kinaya, that means we have to refer back to his intentions. What did he mean by this? So it's between him and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If he says, no, I meant this, I meant that, then it's according to what he says. Then he says, وَشُرُوطُهُ خَمْسَةٌ. So of course, as you see here, وَقَفْتُ, حَبَّسْتُ, سَبَّلْتُ. Right? All of these are أفعال, right? Past tense. And as you see here, the تاء الفاعل is very clear. تصدقت, حرمت, أبدت. Right? وشروطه خمسة. It's شروط, شروطه. What's the hat refers to? شروط is the plural of شرط. That's the conditions. شروطه, the waqf. So the conditions of the waqf are خمسة. 5 conditions. Number 1. كونه في عين. كونه في عين. That means it has to be a very specific item. كونه. الكون is كان يكون, when something was, it becomes. So it's like as if you say in كونه في عين, that the fact that it is in a عين. Right? For it to be in a عين. عين, we talked it before many times, which is the item. Some asset or something like this. في عين معلومة. معلومة means known. So very specific asset. He cannot say وقفت and then he's silent. وقفت what? Nobody knows anything. Or وقفت أرضا. I made waqf of a land. What land? Where is the land? What is it? So كونه في عين معلومة. So it has to be specific. It has to be known. Within that first condition, يصح بيعها. يصح بيعها. يصح means from الصحيح, that means it's valid. بيعها, selling it. What is the هاء ألف here? The ضمير refers to العين. Right? So this item, now the subject of the endowment or the waqf, then it has to be a specific item. It's known. And يصح بيعها. يصح بيعها means it's to define it to what items can you give as waqf? Can it be anything? He says يصح بيعها. It is valid to be sold. Not the item that he's going to make a waqf. Is just to get to understand what are the things that you can give as waqf. For example, a land, you can sell land. So you can give it as a waqf. What else? A building, you can sell a building. So you can give that building as a waqf. So anything يصح, that means if it's haram, then it's not valid. So you cannot give waqf as something that is haram, even though the people, they buy it and sell it. So يصح بيعها. So this is being a very specific item, and it's valid to be sold. غير مصحف. But exception here, not a mushaf. Because the mushaf, according to the madhab of Imam Ahmad, it is not permissible to sell. And there's another riwayah that it's permissible to be sold, and this is what many of the ulama are upon, because the need of people having masahif, so they sell it and they buy it. But this is, of course, many they would say it's not permissible. Mushaf is not to be, for buying and selling. People making money from it. But again, if others, they take the other opinion. But anyway, according here to the madhab, the mushaf, meaning that the mushaf, it is, since it's not permissible to sell, but it still can be given as waqf. Right? So this is what is meant here. Because if you say, if you stop as يصح بيعها, someone would say, according to the madhab, you cannot sell mushaf. So that means mushaf are not to be given as waqf. No, you can give mushaf as a waqf. So this is an exception to what is valid to be sold. So you can give a mushaf as a waqf. وينتفع بها. Also, it has to be, people would get benefit from it. It can be used, it can be utilized. وينتفع بها مع بقائها, while it stays without being ruined or without being consumed. So that's why a land, building, things like that. Not, for example, as we mentioned it before, you don't make apples for waqf. People eat it. You can say, I waqaftu these apples for the masjid. What do you mean? You just keep it in the freezer forever? No, that means you can't say the word waqaftu because people eat it. So it has to, al-waqf is something that stays, is never consumed, is never ruined, is never goes bad, things like this. So that's why he says here that وَيُنْتَفَعُ بِهَا مَعَ بَقَائِهَا, while it's baqa. Al-baqa is it stays, it's not ruined. Darul baqa is the day of judgment, the everlasting living. So baqa'iha, all of these dama'ir refers to the ayn. So now the sentence كونه في عين معلومة. So العين معلومة is known. يصح بيعها غير مصحف وينتفع بها مع بقائها. It's to be benefited from it without it can be utilized and used by while keeping it, or the asset itself, it stays and it does not get ruined. Clear? طيب, and then he says وكونه, he says خمسة, right? 5. So let's see at the end how many. Do you have it in your books counted or without counting? Because the original matn has no counting. Some of the versions of the books, the authors, they would make it easy. We have a count? Okay. Okay, we'll see then the countings. So وكونه على بر. So another condition here for the waqf, كونه. So we know now what كونه means. How can you say وكونه? The fact that it is like when you say, then it is to be, or to be, right? So وكونه على بر, that the waqf كونه على بر, it's upon matters of righteousness. So the waqf has to be, when you give waqf, that means you're dedicating that benefit that comes from that ayn, from that specific item, to be in matters of righteousness, in matters that are charitable, something of a good cause. So this is birr means. You cannot, if a person makes waqf for the waqf to be spent on haram, to spend on people that are evil, or people that are committing sins, or to make waqf to be spent on singers or something like that. So it has to be a matter of righteousness. وَكَوْنُهُ عَلَى بِرٍ. عَلَى بِرٍ, that means the asset is not birr itself. The benefit, it will be given to good causes. Has to be given to a good cause. birr. وَيَصِحُّ مِن مُسْلِمٍ عَلَى ذِمِّي. Part of that is وَيَصِحُّ. That means it's valid, it's okay to be from a Muslim to a dhimmi. A Muslim can make his waqf to a dhimmi. Dhimmi is from Ahlul Kitab, a Jew or a Christian. A person can give part of his waqf, for his waqf to be given to a non-Muslim, basically. وعكسه, and the opposite. If a dhimmi, if a non-Muslim makes a waqf for a Muslim, sure, no problem. This is different than the mawarith, different than inheritance. So this is something that is okay. And it's not against the acts of birr or righteousness. وَيَصِحُّ مِن مُسْلِمٍ عَلَى ذِمِّي وَعَكْسُهُ, and the opposite. Clear? Then وَكَوْنُهُ, meaning the waqf, for it to be في غير مسجد ونحوه على معين يملك. وكونه في غير مسجد, Okay, so for it to be in other than the masajid, so this is something else other than if it's the waqf is upon the masjid, then this condition does not apply here. But he means by this is وكونه في غير مسجد. That means if it's the waqf is not upon a masjid ونحوه and the like of a masjid, then على معين يملك. على معين يملك. That means it's for it's to be given for someone that he has the ability or has the validity to own something. So he can own, he has the power to own. But of course, he's not owning the waqf, but it's you cannot give it to a dog, for example, even though there are dogs, animals, things like this, there are waqf on it, right? على معين, if it's معين. So now we have معين and we have a non-معين, right? So that means if you have a معين, that means someone specific. So that once that specific has to be someone that is competent to own. Because you're going to say, I'm going to keep this land and whatever, land is waqf. And whatever rent comes from it, I'm going to give it to my cousins, something like that. Or my children is to be only given to my children. So these children, they have to have the competency to own. So they're human beings, they can own, so that means it's okay to make specifics, individuals that will benefit from it. If it's not muayyan, then it's okay. For example, and there are waqf, as they say, till today, if you go to the haram, there is waqf for the seeds for the birds. Somebody in the past, they made, you find people putting seeds, it's waqf. They have it waqf just for the birds of the haram. Some, in the long time ago, you would find even waqf for the dogs. Someone would have food for the dogs and he would arrange something that it's, for the dogs to be fed, or for animals to be fed. Or they would go even in places where you would find, of course, water for the people walking, but even for animals, for on top of the mountains, for animals, for birds. So that's not muayyan. That's not a specific, so it does not apply here. يملك has the ability to own something. So here وكونه في غير مسجد ونحوه. So that's what ونحوه. So if it's a masjid, masjid is not owned by anyone, so they don't have to be applying this condition. And the like of the masjid, if it's not a specific item or specific someone that would benefit from it, على معين يملك. Okay. وكون واقف نافذ التصرف. وكون واقف نافذ التصرف. That the fact that Al-Waqf is the endower, the one that owns the waqf. Al-Waqf is نافذ التصرف. نافذ التصرف, that means what? That التصرف, we talked about التصرف before, remember? التصرف is to have the ability or the competency to give gifts, to sell, to buy. So he has to be someone that has the ability to use his money, to utilize his money. So or someone is acting on his behalf. That's why نافذ التصرف. So it has to be either the owner or someone else that is acting on his behalf, and his actions are valid. So, for example, if someone comes and he says, I give my father's land for waqf, we tell him that you're not nafid al-tasarruf, it's not your business. So it has to be someone that has the power to give something as waqf. وكون واقف نافذ التصرف. And also the waqif might own it, but he's not نافذ التصرف because they made hajr on him. Remember hajr? When they, what was the word in English for hajr? When he was prevented from using his own money because of incompetency or something like this. Power of attorney, yes, now. So the waqif, of course, which is a very obvious condition, he has to be nafidh. And nufudh is when you go through something. يا معشر الجن والإنس إن استطعتم أن تنفذوا من أقطار السماوات والأرض. In Surah Al-Rahman, if you're able to go through the heavens and earth, then go through. So nafidh, that means he goes through with with his transactions. And التصرف, that means his fact that he would sell, that he would give charity, this is valid for him. And the other condition, ووقفه ناجزا. ووقفه ناجزا. His waqf has to be najiz. And najiz, that means it's immediate. It's something that it cannot be delayed, right? Or cannot